Welcome to WriterCon, a gathering place for writers to share their knowledge about writing and the writing world. Your hosts are William Bernhardt, best-selling novelist and author of the Red Sneaker books on writing, and Lara Bernhardt, award-winning author of the Wantland Files book series.
Thank you, Jesse Ulrich, and hello, writers. We are coming to you today live from the Harmony of the Seas for the WriterCon Cruise. And we have some fabulous cruisers, as you can tell. We got a boatload of wonderful writers, some of whom we'll talk about the cruise later on the podcast. But for now, Lara, my first mate, how's the cruise been for you this year?
Honestly, best ever. They just get better and better. We have a big group of wonderful writers with us. And this has really been an astonishingly deep set of sessions, I think. We've really gotten into a lot of good work. Plus, I figured out how room service works, so I had breakfast in bed.
Oh, yeah. Having coffee brought to your room every morning. You think we could get one of the kids to do that for us, or?
Maybe we could train Bustifer.
Ah, the cat. Yes, absolutely. Sure. Jesse, thank you again for making this live broadcast possible. I know it's a chore to bring all this equipment on the ship. Plus, you've been teaching about podcasts and audiobooks and other topics. So, other than the hot tub and the crown and anchor bathrobe that you get, what's your favorite part of the cruise?
You pretty much covered my favorite parts of the cruise, which is the hot tub and the bathroom. No, in comparison to last year, this is a much larger group. And in some ways I was worried about that, but in actuality, it made for more sort of diverse conversations and interesting topics that were brought up. And so I think it's been great.
I would wholeheartedly agree. So here's the next special aspect of this podcast, whereas we normally have a single guest, but when you got so many talented people on board, it seems silly to restrict the panel to one person. So instead, we've got a cornucopia of writing world riches. We've got Katharine Sands, fabulous literary agent from the Sarah Jane Freeman Agency. And we've got R.J. Johnson, author of 10 different books, including the science fiction fantasy novel Dreamslinger, my fave. And Lauren Smith, the USA Today-bestselling author of more than 80 books available in not only here in the United States, but many countries all around the world. So, let's plunge right into it. But before we get to the news, Jesse, let's hear some testimonials from the participants on the WriterCon Cruise.
Hi, I am Kim Brixey, and this is my second time on the WriterCon Cruise, and it is fantastic. It's a great time to have all these experts trapped on the boat with us, and we just have experts in we have a publisher on board. We have a best-selling author on board, USA best-selling author. We have a audiobook editor, all these, and Bill and Laura, of course. And we just get to pick their brain all week. So it's been fantastic. I've learned a lot, and I can't wait to get home and implement everything.
Hi, I'm Juliet Spencer. I'm here on the last night of the WriterCon Cruise 2024, and this experience has been wonderful. We've attended classes every day, and I've learned something new every day. Different things about technique, marketing, publishing, getting an agent, just a plethora of information. I've learned more in this week than I learned during 2 years of fiction classes at college.
Hi, I'm Luke Town, and I'm here to kind of give a testimonial about my experience here on the WriterCon Cruise. And I have to say that this is my first one I've ever attended, and it was absolutely amazing. I come into the cruise not really knowing what to expect, and the amount of information that was going to be provided Bill, Laura, and the whole crew here was just amazing, and it was very helpful. And I had some time to sit down and talk to them about my direction and how to improve my writing, and I received a wealth of knowledge. I would absolutely recommend this event, this cruise, to anybody who's aspiring to be a writer, or if you're a seasoned writer and wanting to get more input to become a better writer. I can't say enough good things about it.
I am Carrie Boatwright Rarrett. Talking about what I have gotten out of the cruise, it's been really just a lot of, I was super reluctant to come on the cruise because I'm so far out of my comfort zone here, and I feel like a wee babe of a writer, and I don't belong amongst all of these other, published amazing writers. But what I've gotten is so much warmth and so much acceptance, and it's been a really great experience and has made me feel like I belong in this community. So anybody who's thinking about coming should absolutely do it.
News story number one. Here's the headline: Amazon is spying on its rivals. Are you shocked? Let me tell you what's going on. The Wall Street Journal actually broke this story of alleged espionage, which goes back to 2015, when Amazon allegedly created a secret operation called Project Curiosity. Sounds kind of ominous already, doesn't it? And then they rechanged it to the much more boring Small Business Insights, yawn. But the whole point of it was to gather intelligence on its rivals in the online retail industries. Amazon is denying claims that it was spying, but saying instead it was just conducting old-fashioned competitor research, right? What they did was create a shell company called Big River Services. Get it? Amazon, Big River, no connection at all there, to sell products on rival marketplaces in the United States and abroad, places like Overstock and Etsy and Alibaba and eBay and even Walmart, according to the Wall Street Journal. It also used rival fulfillment and logistics and shipping companies. Their employees were instructed not to tell the outside companies that they worked for Amazon, not to use their Amazon email addresses. Employees even attended an exclusive sellers conference hosted by eBay as representatives of Big River. So, Lara, what do you think? Does this sound like corporate spying to you?
It does, just because they were being so underhanded and secretive about it. I'm a little dubious anytime someone is behaving in a way that they're trying to keep secret. I think it sounds a little sketch.
Mm-hmm. And well, particularly when it's like the clear leader in the online book selling business. I mean, goodness, Amazon, if you're listening, I really love you. However, I don't see why this was necessary. Jesse, do you think Amazon was engaging in underhanded practices? And most importantly, was James Patterson involved?
It's shady when you have to come up with a fake company name to do your shady business. So, if you're coming up with fake business names, you're doing something shady, or you think you're doing something shady, and then you have to hide it. Exactly. Yes. So, and is James Patterson involved? Probably. James, coming for you. All right.
News story number 2. Publishers have filed a brief opposing the Internet Archive case, which is now being appealed. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you'll remember back in June of 2020, several of the large Big Five publishing houses sued this outfit called Internet Archive because they were digitizing, meaning turning into ebooks, millions of print books and distributing them as basically bootleg ebooks for free on the Internet Archive website without the consent of the publishers or the authors, much less paying them anything. So they lost on summary judgment, which lawyers in the audience knows. The judge basically said, we don't even need a trial. This is so obvious. you lose. And settled and decided in favor of the publishers, finding Internet Archive liable for copyright infringement. Well, now IA has appealed. The publishers have filed a brief opposing this appeal. And let me give you a brief shot of what IA is trying to do. They're trying to justify, and this is a quote from the opposing brief, mass-scale infringement through a wholly manufactured theory it calls controlled digital lending, or CDL. What they're arguing is that this is basically, and now I'm quoting from IA's brief, a modern, more efficient version of lending that is used by libraries across the country. But maybe not. Here are the two excerpts from the brief that I thought were the most interesting. One, CDL, this controlled digital lending, is a frontal assault, the publishers are saying, on the foundational copyright principle that rights holders exclusively control the terms of sale for every different format of their work. And that has been the foundational principle of publishing and books since way back when. Second quote, the authorized library ebook market is thriving right now. At this point in time, readers have never had more access through libraries, real libraries, to free licensed ebooks. But those libraries are, of course, paying a licensing fee to get access to them. Just to give you some statistics, the number of ebooks and audiobooks checked out via Overdrive, which I think is the primary distributor of ebooks to libraries, in 2020, it was 430 million ebooks, more than a 500% increase from about 8 years before. So, RJ, you're on top of everything, so I'm going to turn to you.
Oh, boy.
One argument that IA has used, this is just borrowing books like what a library does. Are you buying that?
Well, no, of course not, especially since they're not paying any kind of royalties to those authors or publishers. If there was some kind of licensing program in place for them, and they weren't just scraping and taking the books and putting them on their own system, I mean, that's one thing.
Yeah. But this is different.
100%.
Katharine, you're, as a literary agent, in the business of protecting your authors. You have to deal with digital copying and copyright all the time in your work. Does this seem like, the legal jargon they toss out, this is fair use, or this is transformative work because we're turning it into something else altogether? You buying any of this?
No, it's definitely not fair use. And another case to take a look at is the Spotify one. The Authors Guild is all over that, looking for transparency. But this is not fair use. This is obviously infringement.
Yeah, I think you're right. Lara, what do you think?
I am so fired up about this. It makes me so angry that they're trying to liken this to the library model. Let's be clear. Libraries distribute books after they have acquired them through the right channels. They are a wonderful wealth of support and information and resources. We have a daughter who works at a library. We have a librarian with us on our cruise, and I had a discussion with her about this. As a child, the library was my oasis. We didn't have a lot, but when I walked in there, I could get anything with my library card. And it just infuriates me that they are trying to compare themselves to this wonderful resource that we have when they're just stealing from us. They're just stealing from authors and not compensating them in any way.
Well, it sounds like we're in agreement on this one.
I'm going to stand up for the Internet Archive here because when they started this process, and still to this day, libraries can only buy like 1 or 2 copies of an ebook, meaning there are people waiting constantly to check out an ebook. And also, when they started this, these were books that were not still in print. So if for the nerds out there, the Internet Archive is actually one of the best places on the internet. Mm-hmm. It is an open source, non-regulated, non-walled way of getting information and access to old music, old games, old things that are no longer available by the people who owned the rights to them. And so I do think in this case, Internet Archive's heart is in the right place. There's just no right way to expound upon the weird way that ebooks are allowed to be lended. Because libraries don't just buy one copy of an ebook. The license they have to buy costs thousands of dollars. It's not just buying an ebook for the price we pay for it. It's a ridiculous system where the money doesn't actually go to the authors, it goes to the publishers. So I am pro Internet Archive. Hot take.
If you don't mind, I'd like to say too.
That is,
Yeah.
Let's go.
Well, I agree with you to a point, especially about orphan works, stuff that's just kind of disappeared and people that don't have access to anymore. I remember Project Ginsburg a while back with Google that was scanning all the classics and everything like that. And there's definitely room for works that, like academic papers, random periodicals from the 50s or something like that, that I think does belong on the Internet Archive like that. And I don't think it's so serious that we're not charging a fee for that kind of stuff, because then that knowledge, that information is still out there and available. So I agree with you to a point on that as well. Absolutely.
Like, I don't want them stealing, I don't know.
My books.
Yeah, I don't want them stealing Bill's books.
Right, yes.
Bill, who pays me. I do not want them stealing. Oh, listen, I don't want them stealing Bill's books. But I do think that there is a avenue for a different sort of connection between the readers of ebooks and how they can check those out from a library. So, because like what the Internet Archive is trying to be the internet's library. And while I love libraries and support them, they are forced into a system where I have to wait 6 weeks for an ebook for no reason. Only because that ebook cost them thousands of dollars to buy more than one copy of. And they're only allowed to have, I believe, 2 copies of an ebook. And that's it. That is a ridiculous system. So, that's all. Hot take.
my books do not cost thousands of dollars for libraries. I can tell you that. So
Well,
I think there's a wide variety in there.
I think that may have been true at one time, and that's what Overdrive has done. They've made it much more affordable. Usually, libraries pay a little bit more than individuals would to get access to the book, but then they can distribute it,
They're still
lend it, right, however many times they want, depending on what they've paid.
Yeah.
And Overdrive is obviously, what, 430 million it said? They're obviously distributing a lot of books to people. But I'm always going to come down on the side of the author because that's what I care about.
But I appreciate what he brought to the discussion.
Yes.
And I applaud you for sharing your hot take too. And I appreciate the pieces that you brought to it.
All right, Jesse, enough with the news. Cue up the music. Let's talk to Katharine Sands, R.J. Johnson, and Lauren Smith. All right, Katharine, R.J., Lauren, thanks for being, you're all friends of the podcast. You've been here before. Lauren was one of the first guests we ever had on this podcast, but it's great to have you back again. Thanks for being on the podcast. So, you know what our traditional first question is? If you could offer writers one piece of advice, and I know most of you could offer a million probably, but if you had to narrow it down to one, what would it be? Lauren, you want to start?
Find out what you're passionate about writing, but when you do write it, write to market. I think the biggest mistake that I see is people get really excited about an idea and they say, I'm going to write about vampires in space. But they don't take into account that there are 2 types of audiences they're going to be dealing with, the vampire fans and the space fans. And if you are really careful, you need to make sure you either really heavily court the space fans or heavily court the vampire. Trying to blend 2 distinctly different worlds doesn't always work. Sometimes you get lucky, but my advice is to lean heavily into one or the other with elements of the secondary thing that you're interested in. So if you have a really unique idea, really study the market. And I'm not saying copy everybody that's out there, but you do need to know what sells and why it sells, and try to make your work figure out what makes it sell within those, understanding those parameters.
Yeah, great advice. RJ, how about you?
Yeah, I've said this a couple times, I think, during the cruise, but it's something that I strongly believe in. When you're writing, you've got to do 2 things. Just start and make it consistent. It's very much like going to the gym. You get yourself into a routine. You get stronger as you do it every day. And then the days that you miss it, well, you actually kind of feel like there's something missing.
Yeah, very true. Katharine, how about you?
What I'd add is so many people only think in terms of the big book, and that's not the way to think if you're starting out. anywhere you get published, anywhere your voice can be heard. Even if you find a nonfiction topic that you write about that somehow pertains back to your fiction, you have no idea who's going to see your work. It's always a message in a bottle. And agents and editors do call people up on the strength of any number of things. So don't only think book, think, where can my writing be seen?
More great advice. All right, Katharine, let's start with an easy one. Describe the future of publishing in detail. What do you think?
Well, the answer I had for you is go look at the Bionic bartenders and see, because that's who's going to be in charge very soon.
Just to explain, this is a real thing on this ship we're on right now. Upstairs, there are two like robotic arms shaking up martinis and serving drinks, right?
That is where AI will bring us. It's all going to be the Terminator. We're all going to be in rubble, fighting like Mad Max
And on that happy
characters.
note.
That's what I predicted. Maybe not. Obviously, we are seeing healthy book sales. There are always going to be books. There have been a lot of "we's all gonna dies" out there. Certainly, we all thought CD-ROM was going to replace books and hypertext was going to come in. And the future will probably be very techy, which RJ knows more about than I do. But we're certainly going to see books written by artificial intelligence. But we still need writers. We need hearts and minds. I don't predict that we'll ever run out of those.
I agree. Lauren, romance has always been popular, but we are seeing it grow and grow. Recently, it proves to be one of the most popular, and we're seeing things like romantasy, where we're seeing romance being fully blended with some other genres, the sugar kink that's out there. Why do you think that is? Why do you think romance not only stays strong, but continues to grow and expand?
Well, it's always been the biggest selling. If anybody isn't aware, it's a $2.8 billion industry and growing. Romance readers tend to read 5 to 6 books a week on average. And a lot of times they are willing to pay for those books. They are not just going to libraries, they're going anywhere. I mean, audiobook sales experienced a huge growth in the last couple of years due to the romance crowd. But I think at the end of the day, we're seeing more movies, we're seeing more TV that is really highlighting love stories, and love stories have always been a prime motivating factor. If you think about TV shows like Cheers, we were always rooting for that couple in Cheers, right? I mean, the idea is that romance is one of the strongest emotions on our planet that motivates us beyond greed and power and some of the other negative emotions. And I think we're starting to finally realize that there should not be a stigma attached to the idea of love stories. I often, when I encounter people that snidely kind of joke that I write, smut or mom porn or something like that, to which I reply, so you watch a show on HBO that has gratuitous sex and violence of which there's no emotional payoff and no positive experiences for the woman in that show and that role. I said, what are you actually supporting? And I challenged them on it, because romance novels are about acceptance of other people's flaws. They're about growing as a character. They're about overcoming obstacles. It's not just men with perfect abs, although we do like men with perfect abs. So I think it's really important to establish that romance speaks to all of us. And if you're not moved by romance, and I'm not saying that everybody has to go out and read romance, but you've probably loved somebody at some point in your life, and that was probably a momentous experience, whether you were 16 or 85. I mean, the point is that love matters on all levels, and it doesn't have to be necessarily romantic love. There's a lot of beautiful stories I've read that are not considered romance, that have stories of parent and child love or best friend love, where, love is not defined necessarily just by romance and sex. And so I think it's incredibly moving to see so many book sales with, books like Fourth Wing and 50 Shades of Grey. They're getting out there in the broader spectrum of people. And I can't tell you in the last how many years I've seen people say, well, I never started reading romance until I read X title. And then they realize that the rest of the romance novels that have been existing for the last 30 to 40 years in the marketplace have had exactly what they've always been looking for. My stories, I always tell people, they're a wild adventure that happens to have sex in it. And so, which is how real life is. Real life should be a grand adventure of wonderful things happening and exciting things and sad things with sex in it. And so I think that's the thing, is that there's this broader appeal that people are starting to realize that romance novels are really fun.
RJ, you and I have a long history with conferences and retreats. I think we met for the first time in Hawaii. Come to think of it, I met Lauren for the first time in a retreat too. And Lara, I think I met you maybe for the second time at a retreat. So clearly retreats are the place to be, I'm just saying. But my question is, we saw science fiction also grow, and horror in particularly exploded last year.
Right.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's just another trend in the industry. I think people, there are always stories will kind of like, what am I trying to say? Continue, like go through like cycles. So back in the day, Westerns were the big thing. In the 80s, the buddy cop movie. In the aughts, vampire movies. MCU in the teens. I think like things like this are very cyclical, and we're just seeing another like generation pick up a horror book and say, oh, this is kind of fun. I want to read more stuff like this. And then there's just that feedback loop. They enjoy this horror book. They want to try the next one.
Very nice. Katharine, can you tell us how the role of an agent has changed in recent years? And since we love for you to predict the future, can you get your crystal ball out again and tell us what changes you see coming in the future?
Well, what's definitely happening, as I shared, the big news has been that the AALA has loosened its vice-like grip on agents performing other roles. In addition to the traditional role of representing a project to a publishing house, we're seeing agents get much more into brand strategy, content strategy, publishing strategy, and you'll see these listings on LinkedIn. And this is also bringing about different fee structures, different compensation packages. Still somewhat controversial because we're coming off 30 years of the one guy who held all the cards in the industry, because when he ruled the AAR, everything was deemed unethical. Everything. And I mean everything. And if you see old communications from the former organization called the AR, they were against retreats like this. They saw this as exploitative. I mean, according to their languaging. But again, this went back to the profit motive of the one guy. And when he was drummed out by the new leadership, some of us rejoiced. But I digress. So we're seeing an evolution of the role. And you're going to see literary services offered by agencies, which are actually in place, in the best possible way to offer them. Developmental work, much more work with hybrid and independent publishing houses, which is also very different because the traditional fee structure of the percentage of the advance against royalties is just simply not applicable with hybrid publishing, where it might be an author publishing house partnership. So we're seeing an evolution of the role that way.
Wow, that's really excellent information. Thank you for that. Lauren, you are not just a brilliant writer. I am so impressed with your business savvy. You are a remarkable businesswoman too. You've kind of been at the forefront, really, of authors taking control and taking charge of their own careers. You even wrote an article for us for our WriterCon magazine focused on foreign rights. How did you get into that? How did you start getting your books out there in other languages?
So I always watch what authors that are bigger than me do, because I'm trying to always see where that next thing that I need to be leading my career toward. And one of the things that I noticed was foreign rights were really starting to grow. And I began, asking my agency, who has most agencies will have a subrights agent, or they have an agent that works directly in-house that focuses on subrights. So we're talking audio, film, foreign, and things like that. And I started asking them, hey, do you think you could shop some of my rights? And I'm a mid-lister. That means that I'm not a New York Times bestseller that's gone massively global, but I'm also not a total newbie starting out. And so the response from mid-listing can be kind of varied. Some agents are very in love with supporting their people. Some agents are like, well, I got other things going on. We'll check into it. We'll get back to you. And I kind of always got the we'll check into it, get back to you response, or the gently implied, well, you're not a really big name, so no foreign publisher is going to come and buy your rights. So I thought, well, what's the first step? Maybe I can go to a foreign publisher. Who's to stop me? What's the worst that's going to happen? They're going to say, no. No is not going to hurt me. The word no does not scare me anymore. And that's, I think, a really, really important thing, is you have to learn to let no stop scaring you. And so I decided to reach out to those foreign publishers. They came back and they went, who are you, random author? We've never heard of you. No thanks. Or they just totally ignored my emails and contact form submissions and all of that. So then I started looking to what some of the other independent authors were doing that weren't publishing with houses, and I realized they were self-publishing their translations. So I started researching how to translate my own works. And so I'm not sitting there with the French dictionary translating word for word. I think a lot of people actually really do think that I do that. And I'm like, no, I actually have vetted translators. I have services that I can recommend where you can go out and find your own translators, hire them. They usually charge per word. So if your book is 100,000 words, they'll charge a certain cent amount or euro amount based on your word count of your book. And it can be fairly expensive. So the one thing for me was that I had to start saving up money, start doing a few at a time. I had to strategically pick what books I thought could earn the money back faster. But I hired a translator, did it myself, put the book up the way I would a normal indie book, and then things started to skyrocket. And I had a very nice 6-figure year last year, right before AI flooded the market with AI translations, which I won't talk about because it feels a little doomsday. But it was really amazing to be in charge of my own catalog. And so I have all the ability to put them in any format I want, print, ebook. I can even find translators, which I have not done yet, to do narrating audiobooks yet for those translated works, but that will be my next step at some point. But I'm working right now on getting everything available in ebook and print, which for 85 books in English, I've so far have about 360 total titles on my Amazon dashboard, which is a lot of time management. So know that if you're going that route and you're managing your own foreign rights and producing your own titles, there's a bit of legwork. So get organized, get a spreadsheet, and do all those kind of things. But it's totally feasible that you can do all of this yourself if you find resistance among the people that represent you. Now, I have friends that have amazing agents who have sold their rights to foreign publishers, and it has worked out fantastically. So if you are having success, that's probably the easiest way to go. And I would recommend that first. But if you're not having luck, you can do it yourself. And there's a lot of money in that, I should say. There's a lot of money going traditional or indie. Either way, foreign translations are very lucrative.
Great. RJ,
Yeah.
we asked Katharine about the road ahead for literary agents. What do you see as the future or the road ahead for authors, whether they're traditionally published or indie or otherwise?
That's a tough one too. Because, like you said, you're looking to a crystal ball. I don't think anybody would have predicted the absolute explosion of Kindle ebooks at the time.
I certainly didn't.
You know?
I would have had way different clauses in my contract.
Right, I mean, exactly. And so I think these types of things, as they come, you just have to be very adaptable and very ready for whatever is coming next. I think for writers and authors in the future, you'll see a lot more worry about the rise of AI. Or large language models, as I want to make sure everybody knows. And also the fact that, like, you just have to be ready. You have to forgive me. I didn't get my coffee this morning.
Oh, no. I can't function without my coffee.
Yeah. But no, really, I do believe that it has never been a better time to be a writer.
I agree.
And I think the ability to, like what Lauren was saying, like, get your stuff out there into multiple countries, that's a huge resource that nobody would have imagined they would have even 5 years ago.
Right.
It's true. Okay, just for our illustrious panel in general, we have many aspiring writers in our audience, not just here, but out in cyberspace, listening and or watching. Many of them have written very marketable work, excellent, good marketable work, but maybe don't know how to break into the business. What would you recommend?
This is a toss-up question. Anybody can jump in and go for it.
Everybody, all of you.
Well, I don't want to monopolize, but I just answered. But I do believe that you just have to put it out there, and that was a strategy that I did. I sent out a couple hundred query letters. Never heard back from anybody. Whether that was because my query letter was terrible or the agents, my stuff wasn't right for those agents that I was sending it to. I eventually just went ahead and self-published, and that started me on the journey that has me now talking to you all here. So I think that is probably the strongest thing you can do. Is just do it.
On the other end of the spectrum,
Yeah.
I would say that you want to know that there are things you need in your toolbox. One of them is a query letter. And even though you do hear the story that sometimes things are somehow overlooked in the querying process, it's still considered the way to get your work reviewed by an agency. So you want to have a query letter that's beautifully honed. It represents the best of the best of the best of you. And at the same time, you want to have maybe 25-word version, because you're going to use these again and again. You're always going to be asked, what is your book about? So you want to make certain that you have that organized in such a way that it does draw on all the reasons people would respond to your work.
Lauren, I'm going to go ahead and bring this up just because you and I had a nice conversation about switching gears. And so I think we have to be adaptable. You and I kind of commiserated on having some not great experiences with certain imprints. I was very fortunate that my agent had my back and was happy to kind of guide me through those not great experiences. But I think it's okay for us to try one route. And you've had excellent success by striking out on your own.
So for anyone that didn't know, I was traditionally published for several years, and I had 10 books with 3 different publishers. 2 of them were the big 5 in New York. And the main thing that I've realized is that no matter what, you need to understand what the paths are, whether you're going to really go the traditional route, whether you're really going to go the indie route. But regardless, Katharine is right. You really have to understand what your product is, because even if you plan to self-publish, you need to be able to summarize your book very briefly. You need to have a summary of what it's about, like what a back cover book description or back cover blurb prepared. You need to have what I call, like she talked about, your toolkit. You need to really have a marketing toolkit. And that applies for indie or traditional. You need that for both. But I think the biggest thing that I see is that a lot of people get deeply disappointed when New York doesn't work out or a publishing house doesn't work out. Statistically, it is hard to get into a publishing house. It doesn't mean your book isn't good, though. It just means that maybe statistically you didn't find the right agent or you didn't find the right houses to query. It's just sometimes it's a literal numbers game. And so if that's the case and you're kind of running out of steam, it's okay to transition. I think indie or self-publishing used to be such a dirty word back then. And I think there is still a stigma about whether books are good quality, because there frankly are a lot of bad indie books out there. Now, the funny thing is I'm also starting to see a lot of bad trad books. And the biggest reason is, and it's such a simple reason, is editing. And I found this, my own experience, when I left my traditional publishing house, I had transitioned editors. They brought in a very young editor. She could, clean up a sentence, but she didn't know what was missing. She didn't know what should be there. She was wanting to take out things that I, after 40 books in my career, knew worked. I knew it worked with my audience. I knew it worked with my genre. And I was proven right later on when that book that I edited my way won an award. And I think the big thing is editing. So no matter what you're going to do, your book has to be in perfect condition, especially even before you submit. Because when I was in one of my final contracts with St. Martin's Macmillan, we were finding out that editors were saying it's got to be perfect before it even hits our inbox. And they were telling agents that. They were like, this thing needs to be immaculate and basically ready to publish. So you really need to have that mindset of, my book's got to be perfect no matter what I'm going to do. And I think a lot of people that self-publish, they say, I want to save money. I don't want to hire an editor. Or, they want to go trad and they think, I still don't need an editor. I'll get assigned an editor. Well, there's so much you learn when working with a good editor. There are a lot of bad editors out there. So please do your due diligence, get referrals, ask for a sample, first 10 pages or 5 pages edit where you can see how they edit, because you don't want to work with someone that's going to destroy your self-esteem because they're an overly critical editor. truly good editors can inspire you to make your book better. They will not tear it down and destroy your self-esteem. It's one thing if they're suggesting something different and you have to kind of take a few days to take that thought in, but if they're really nurturing, but not saying, oh, your book is perfect, but they're saying, I love this concept. What if we did this to make it better? And I think that's the biggest mistake I see is that when people are first getting into this, no matter what path they take, they don't use the appropriate tools. They think editing comes last in this process. It does not. You need to be thinking about it. The second you finish your rough draft, start looking for an editor, no matter what you do, and get on that.
Boy, that is so right. I remember when I got my first edited manuscript back from my editor at Ballantine, and I took it out and it's just bleeding with red ink, and I'm like, don't they understand how brilliant I am? But after I actually sat down and started going through it page by page, it was probably the most educational week of my life as a writer. Okay, one last question for all of you. And this time I want you guys to talk about yourselves. What are your goals for the days or perhaps even years ahead? RJ, how about you?
So this is a very small, silly goal. I mean, everybody, you want your books to be everywhere, a New York Times bestselling list. You want to see them and turn into movies and TV shows and everything like that. But honestly, I think my biggest goal is just seeing my book for sale at an airport kiosk. Legitimately. I feel like once you show up in that sort of location, that because the shelf space there is so limited, that's when you know you've really made it. And so that honestly, that is my tiny little silly goal for my writing career.
Not silly. You got to know your goals. That's great.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Lauren, how about you?
I would say if you want your book in an airport, go and sneakily put it in the airport.
That's a good. You know what? That's fair.
I am not kidding. I do this with libraries because it's hard in my hometown to get libraries to take my books. So I purposely sneak in with my own copies, and they're not tagged. I don't care if someone steals them. I'm like, hey, let's just make something happen. Have somebody talk about my book, because I don't know how many times you hear the producer was like, well, I was trapped in the Chicago airport and this lady handed me her book next to me and I thought, that's great. Oh, it's my next best movie. And you're like, well, how is that going to happen? Put your book in the library. put your book in the airport. Put it anywhere you want. I literally had a joke about my brother that lives in LA. I said, I might have you drive to every studio and leave my book in the lobby. Because one of my goals is to have a movie made. I have to say it's fun things. It's not really bragging, but it's fun things. One of my goals was to have someone name their character, a child after my character. I've had that happen. He's 7 now and I'm Auntie Lauren, which is kind of amazing because he lives in New Zealand and I've never met him. But I get his Christmas card every year and his school pictures in the mail, and it's very fun. And I've had someone do a tattoo on their body from something from one of my books, which she read my book while her father was dying, and it really made an impression on her and got her through a hard time. And she was in Brazil, and this was a Portuguese translated book. So again, you're making connections. But my career goal probably next would be movies, so we're working on that right now.
Catherine, how about you?
I was just thinking, I'm in 2 books. One is a corpse. That's what happens when you date writers. And I'm also a murderess.
Oh.
I haven't read that one yet. But my goals, certainly to add more cruising to my life.
There you go.
I go home to an overflowing inbox of people I've neglected. And I hope to find wonderful homes for all of them.
Hey, this has been a terrific chat. Thank you all so much for being a part of this podcast and this cruise. Thank you. Jesse, sometimes he makes us fake smile till he makes the cut, Are we good for parting words? It's going to be short. We're almost done. Did you say go for it? Just a few parting words. As you've heard, we're having a blast on the WriterCon Cruise, and we will definitely do this again next year. But the next event on our calendar is, of course, the WriterCon Retreat, which is going to be very different this year. We're moving to a new and fabulous location. And get this, the price is not going up, it's going down. We're moving to the Canebrake Luxury Resort, not far from Tulsa, and it's got pools and hot tubs and a spa and yoga. hiking trails, a golf training thing. It's an e-ticket experience. And on top of all that, there's also going to be talk about writing and instruction and feedback. That's what characterizes the retreat, is that we get much more in depth with your manuscript, and you'll get feedback from many people, which, as I think you heard in this interview, can be invaluable. So please visit the website and check it out. That's WriterCon.com. And of course, the big event, WriterCon's annual conference, will be Labor Day weekend in Oklahoma City. So mark that on your calendars as well. All right? Okay, writers, until next time, keep writing. And remember, you cannot fail if you refuse to quit. All right? See you next time.